The clink of silverware and low murmur of early morning conversations filled the diner. But to me it felt like everything had gone still. My father sat across from me in a vinyl booth that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and old bacon grease. His hands were steady, practiced, as he stirred cream into his mug. Not because it needed it, but because he liked to keep his fingers busy when he was about to say something unpleasant. His eyes, gray like steel left out in the rain, met mine with that familiar weight I'd known since I was small. "You're not leadership material, son. You never have been." His voice was flat, almost casual, like he was commenting on the weather. He didn't flinch after saying it. He just kept stirring his coffee until the spoon clinked against the edge of the cup. I felt the words settle into me like a stone dropping through water. No splash, just sinking deep. I didn't blink. I didn't look away. "Is that so?" I asked quietly, my tone even. "That's so," he said, leaning forward as if lowering his voice would make his words sound wise instead of cruel. "You don't have the backbone to run anything bigger than a lemonade stand. And there's no shame in that. Some people are meant to follow orders. That's you." His lips curled in what might have been mistaken for a smile if I didn't know him better. It was satisfaction, not kindness. I looked at the cracked Formica table between us. I could see the reflection of the ceiling fan blades spinning lazily above. The air smelled of fried potatoes and bitter coffee, but it was his words that turned my stomach. "So that's what you think of me," I said, finally calm as glass. "It's what I know," he replied. "I'm just being honest. Better you hear it from me than waste years chasing something you're not built for." He sat back, glancing around the diner like he was already bored of the conversation. When the check came, he snatched it up before I could reach for it, tossing a few bills down like the matter was settled. I rose from the booth, my coat slung over my arm. "Thanks for breakfast," I said evenly, forcing a polite nod. "Anytime," he said, eyes already drifting to his phone. "Just think about what I said. Don't set yourself up for disappointment." The bell above the diner door jingled as I stepped out into the cold. The air hit me sharp, the kind of cold that wakes you up whether you want it to or not. I walked toward my car with my chest tight. Not from anger, not even from hurt, but from a strange, cutting clarity. The sky was low and gray, the kind of sky that pressed down on you. I didn't shout. I didn't try to convince him he was wrong. I smiled, shook his hand before leaving, and thanked him for being honest. But inside, something shifted. On the drive home, the wipers beat a slow rhythm as the wet pavement gleamed under the early sun. His voice replayed in my head like an old recording I couldn't shut off. "You're not leadership material. You never have been." I thought about Little League, standing on a dusty field at 12 years old after hitting my first home run. I ran the bases beaming, only to find him at the fence, arms crossed, telling me I just got lucky while other parents clapped and cheered. I thought about high school graduation, the handshake he gave me instead of a hug, muttering, "Let's see if you can handle real life." I thought about every moment I had ever tried to show him who I was, only to watch him look through me like I was an unfinished draft of the son he wanted. That morning wasn't new. It was just the first time he'd stopped pretending. My whole life, he'd spoken in little cuts. This was just the deep one that drew blood. By the time I reached my apartment, the numbness had burned off, replaced by something cleaner. I hung up my coat, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. The documents were still there, lined neatly in folders. Contracts, projections, loan agreements, everything I've been building for months while working my day job. My side project, a small logistics firm with high growth potential, had just landed its first major client. I hadn't told him a word. Why would I? He never believed in me, and I stopped asking for his approval years ago. But now his words felt like a gift, a challenge, a blueprint for exactly how to prove him wrong. I decided right then I wouldn't fight him with arguments. I wouldn't try to make him see me. I'd fight him with results, and I wouldn't raise my voice once. The next 2 weeks passed like clockwork. While he went about his business, I signed papers, finalized deals, and quietly became the majority owner of the company his own firm had been trying to court. I didn't gloat. I didn't even tell anyone but my attorney. I waited, planning the moment carefully, savoring the irony that would come. When I finally called him, the sky was clear and cold, just like that breakfast morning. My voice was steady. "Dad," I said, I've got an opening for an operations manager. I heard you're available. There was silence on the line, long enough for me to imagine him glancing at the phone to see if I was joking. Then he laughed, low and short, like he didn't know whether to be amused or insulted. You serious? He asked, his voice rough. Yes, I said simply. No catch. No tricks. Just business. Another pause. I could almost hear his pride cracking, though he tried to hide it behind a forced chuckle. Well, all right then. Guess I could take a look at what you've got going. I let the corner of my mouth curve in the faintest smile, though he couldn't see it. Good. I'll send over the paperwork. And just like that, the man who told me I'd never be fit to lead had agreed to work for me. He said yes. When my father walked into my office for the first time, I watched his eyes dart from corner to corner like a man stepping into a stranger's house. He paused at the door a second too long, scanning the room as if searching for seams. Anything to prove I'd borrowed this life instead of building it. His gaze lingered on the oak desk, the polished floor, the framed contract on the wall. I saw the disbelief flicker, quick as a faulty light bulb. He tried to bury it behind a thin smile, but his jaw tightened, and his fingers tapped once against his briefcase before he stepped forward. Nice setup, he said, voice flat as stone, as if the words tasted bitter. Thanks, I replied evenly, standing to shake his hand. His grip was firm but off balance, like someone bracing against wind. Let's get you settled. I handed him the onboarding forms, nothing glamorous, standard paperwork, direct deposit, ID badge photos. He signed each page without comment, though I caught the slight twitch of his lip when he saw my signature already printed under CO. Desk is this way, I said, motioning toward the back corner. He followed silently, his polished shoes clicking against the tile. I'd chosen that corner on purpose, close enough to watch, far enough to remind him this wasn't his empire. His desk was neat, functional, and unremarkable. No executive gloss. No mahogany paneles. Just a workstation like everyone else's. I learned a long time ago that the best revenge isn't loud. It's quiet. It's steady. It looks like grace even when it isn't. So I didn't make speeches. I didn't drop hints. I just gave him work, tedious, ordinary work. I'll need these inventory reports checked by noon, I said, and shipments scheduled for the West Line. He nodded, but there was a stiffness in it, the kind that comes from swallowing pride too fast. He'd been a senior executive once, a man who wore tailored suits and barked orders to rooms full of people who jumped to obey. Now he was under me, and I treated him with polite indifference. No cruelty, no mockery, just cool professionalism. I shook his hand again, smiled as if nothing between us was personal, and walked back to my office without another word. The stillness of those first days was louder than any confrontation could have been. He tried to wear authority like an old coat, but it didn't fit here. I watched him from my doorway sometimes, his shoulders hunched, his jaw tight as he dialed vendor numbers to confirm deliveries, his voice softening when he realized half of them didn't even recognize his name. In those quiet hours, memories surfaced uninvited. I remembered standing in the driveway at 12, clutching my science fair ribbon like it was gold, while he leaned against his car and muttered, "Real men don't waste time on toys." I remembered being 16, nervously holding college brochures, asking which school he thought was best for me, and hearing him say, "Don't expect me to hold your hand through this." I remember being 22, my first startup collapsing in debt, walking into our house with shame burning my throat, only to hear him laughing on the phone, telling a friend his dreamer son finally learned his place. I realized then this wasn't about one breakfast conversation. This was about a lifetime of someone trying to keep me small. As I watched him fumble with spreadsheets and complain about menial tasks, I saw the cracks in his armor. He wasn't as strong as I once believed. He made excuses when deadlines slipped. The software's clunky, he'd say, or your people don't know how to communicate. His voice carried that same condescension I remembered from childhood, except now there was an edge of uncertainty under it. One afternoon, I caught him whispering to a junior analyst near the printer, his tone low and conspiratorial. I didn't hear every word, but I caught enough: complaints about my leadership, suggestions that the company wasn't as solid as it looked. He didn't know that analyst had been with me since day one, loyal enough to tell me everything before the day was over. I said nothing. I didn't confront him. I didn't let on that I knew. I simply logged the information away like adding another card to a winning hand. Every whisper, every rolled eye, every attempt to gather allies was another reminder he hadn't changed. He still needed to feel bigger by making someone else feel smaller. But this time, I wasn't the boy in his shadow. I was the man holding the keys to his future. And I had no intention of slamming the door. Not yet. By the end of his first week, I knew exactly what I was dealing with. I didn't need a guess. I'd watched his every move. How he lingered too long by the vending machine. How he avoided eye contact when I walked past. How his voice grew sharp when junior staff asked for help. He wasn't just proud. He was cornered. His resume had been dressed up like a shop window, but I looked past the glass. The calls I made to old contacts told me more than he ever would. His own business hadn't just slowed down. It had collapsed. Vendors unpaid. Debts buried under polite words like restructuring. He'd been eased out of his last executive role, not retired as he claimed. That breakfast lecture about me not being leadership material, it had nothing to do with me. It was his own failures staring him in the mirror, and he hated the reflection. I didn't confront him. I didn't ask why he lied. I already knew. Some men can't stand to see their son surpass them. Some fathers would rather break a son than admit they're crumbling themselves. So I crafted a plan, not to humiliate him, but to let him live inside his own reflection. I made it slow, quiet, professional. I reassigned him to a division where every meeting was run by people half his age. I paired him with Kyle, the 21-year-old intern he'd once sneered at in the hallway. Shadow him on these vendor calls. I said one morning, keeping my tone calm. He knows the system better than anyone. My father didn't answer at first. His lips pressed thin, the muscle in his jaw twitching. And in turn, he finally muttered. Yes, I said, looking him dead in the eye. You'll learn a lot. I kept it all clean. Every move was justified. Every decision lined up on paper. If anyone asked, I was just being thorough, making sure new hires got the full scope of operations. But I knew exactly what I was doing. I scheduled meetings without him, then asked him to take notes on decisions already made. I gave him tasks that looked important but carried no weight, coordinating reports, confirming shipments already finalized. He played along, but I saw the resentment pool behind his polite smile. His voice, once loud and commanding, had shrunk to careful, measured tones. I'll get right on that, he'd say, eyes fixed on the floor, as if reading something that wasn't there. At night, I dug deeper. I spent hours at my kitchen table with my laptop glowing in the dark. I found the records of how he siphoned money from the joint venture he ran with my uncle, how he blamed the collapse on bad partners when the IRS came knocking. I found casino receipts stacked up like confessions, labeled as business expenses. I read old emails, brittle and full of excuses, where he told my mother about work trips that were nothing of the sort. None of it shocked me. It just confirmed what I'd always felt. His lectures about manhood, about toughness and leadership, were camouflage for a man who never truly grew up. Once late in the office, I caught him rifling through a shared filing cabinet, eyes darting like a thief. He didn't see me in the doorway. His hands hovered over contracts as if he wasn't sure what he was looking for. Maybe proof I didn't deserve any of this. Maybe something he could use against me. I stepped back before he noticed me, heart steady, mind calm. Let him look. The real power was knowing exactly where every paper lay, and knowing none of them would save him. The company itself was growing fast. Investors were circling, impressed by our new logistics contracts. I've been building this firm quietly for months, brick by brick, long before he ever sat across from me in that diner with his coffee and his cutting words. I kept a folder on my desk, black, unlabeled, locked tight, with every document, every email, every receipt that traced his pattern of dishonesty. I wasn't planning to use it yet, but if he tried to burn me on his way down, I'd have all the water I needed to put out the fire and drown him in the smoke. During the day, I never hinted at any of it. Not a flicker of what I knew crossed my face. I greeted him with the same calm voice, the same polite nod every morning. Good to see you, I'd say, even as I slipped another piece of evidence into my private archive. Power feels heavier when you hold it without showing it off. And the whole time, he walked around the office pretending he still had some upper hand, not realizing he was just another name on my payroll. And the whole time, he walked around the office pretending he still had some upper hand, not realizing he was just another name on my payroll. 2 weeks to the day after that diner breakfast, I stood in my office doorway, watching him pack up his briefcase after another long, unimpressive shift. The office was dim except for the low hum of fluorescent lights and the faint glow of his computer screen. His tie hung loose around his neck, his shirt wrinkled from a day of small assignments he still thought were beneath him. He looked older than I remembered, tired, smaller somehow, like the edges of him had worn down. I walked over slowly, letting my footsteps echo on the polished floor. He didn't notice me until I was standing beside his desk. Without a word, I placed an envelope on the polished wood in front of him. He looked at it, then at me, suspicion in his eyes. His hand hovered before he finally tore it open. A bonus check, his first since joining. He stared at it like it was counterfeit, his lips parting slightly as if he might ask why. But no words came out. "You've done good work," I said softly, keeping my tone even, almost casual. "Keep it up." He swallowed hard, eyes darting between the check and my face. This is generous," he muttered, his voice low, uncertain, like a man who didn't know if he was being congratulated or baited. "It's earned," I replied, slipping my hands into my pockets. Nothing more, nothing less. For a moment, I thought he might thank me, but instead he gave a tight nod, his jaw locking as if gratitude cost too much. I could see it all in his eyes, the bitterness, the confusion, the shame he wouldn't dare speak aloud. He folded the check neatly and slid it into his briefcase, his movements stiff, mechanical, betraying the weight pressing on him. My father, the man who told me I wasn't leadership material, was now working for me, living off the company I built in silence. And I hadn't raised my voice once. I hadn't thrown his words back at him. I hadn't even asked him to admit he was wrong. That was the beauty of it. He closed his briefcase and stood, straightening his back as though he needed to recover some scrap of dignity before leaving. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said, his voice clipped. "I'll be here," I answered. My tone held no edge, no triumph. Just fact. When he left the office, I stayed behind, leaning against his desk for a moment, staring at the door he'd walked through. I could still hear the faint echo of his shoes in the hallway, fading into silence. I didn't need to fire him or ruin him. That wasn't the point. The point was deeper, quieter. I no longer needed his approval to breathe. I didn't need to prove anything to him. I'd already proven it to myself. Later that night, as I locked the office, the empty space felt almost alive with memory. The darkened glass walls reflected back the boy I used to be, chasing his praise like it was oxygen. I remembered standing outside his study door as a kid, holding test papers I thought would impress him, listening to him dismiss me without even looking up. I remembered cold handshakes where I'd hoped for hugs, advice that came sharp as a knife, compliments that never came at all. Walking through the quiet parking lot, I felt no anger, just clarity. His voice, once so loud in my life, had faded to background noise. And I realized something freeing. His opinion didn't matter anymore. The next morning, he came in early, maybe to show he was still in control of something. He nodded at me politely in the hall, but his eyes never met mine for more than a second. I saw the way he glanced at coworkers, the way he tried to gauge if they knew who he was. Some of them did. Some didn't. None of them cared. That was the real cut. I sat in my office that afternoon, reviewing quarterly numbers while he shuffled between low-level tasks. Every now and then, I caught him looking my way, as if waiting for me to slip up. But there was nothing to see. I'd built this company brick by brick, and no shaky hand from the past could tear it down. I had become the man he said I'd never be, and he had become the man who worked for me. I didn't humiliate him. I didn't destroy him. I just let him live in the truth. Quiet, undeniable truth. And that was enough. Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional. It explores powerful themes of betrayal, resilience, and the ultimate triumph in the face of familial rejection. This narrative aims to highlight the importance of believing in yourself and the unexpected turns life can take when you prove your worth.